Are the transition-wise, Lincoln, and how what's going to happen officially on August 2nd in the first season of the Big Ten kind of affects the way that the USC football program operates?
Well, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. I mean, I think certainly you're looking at a plan for the travel, although football is maybe the sport least affected by travel in terms of just not having many games. I think maybe the biggest transition is just new opponents, new venues, going against different coaches, different rosters. I think that'll honestly be the biggest transition. We're still, in our climb, getting ready to enter our third year here at USC, and working to build a national championship caliber roster and a program that continually competes for that, like this program has throughout much of history. And so we're climbing and adapting kind of based on that anyways. And so I know a lot gets made of, do you construct your roster different in the Big Ten and with these new opponents? And in some ways, maybe you do, but I think more for us is we're just on a climb, kind of regardless of who we're playing, and we've obviously got to be ready to adapt to play against some really good teams and some really good coaches.
You've coached some phenomenal talents, and then you've watched those talents leave, as those talents have to do, and that same thing happens this year as Caleb moves on. From a coaching perspective and the mindset, when you lose a game-changing talent like that, what happens?
It honestly can be a positive. It's, Tennessee won their first championship here in the modern era the year after Peyton Manning left. I mean, there's a lot gets made of it because, there is, when you do have a player that wins some awards or does some of the great things like others that we've had have done and like Caleb did for us, there becomes from the outside so much attention on that one player, but it's still a team game. And it's still the other 21 guys, they're starting on either side of the ball, the special teams, I mean, the depth of your roster, all those things are ultimately what wins. And sure, it's great to have those guys, but we're doing a lot of building. And so, I think guys that we've lost that have been #1 picks or won the Heisman or whatever it was, there's always been that sentiment of like, oh my God, how are you going to survive the next year? And we've tended to do okay, so I think we will again.
Great trivia question, by the way. It's T. Martin, right? The quarterback that actually led him to the national championship? Yeah, I think Peyton's still probably a little bit mad about that. Defensively, Coach Lynn comes in from across town. How much of an impact can he make immediately?
A lot. I mean, look what he did at UCLA last year. A defense that wasn't very good statistically the year before, and all of a sudden was one of the best defenses in the country last year. So adding him, bringing in the quality of assistant coaches that we did on the defensive side, I think says a lot. One, that those guys wanted to be at USC. They see the potential and what we can be and believe that we can get there sooner rather than later. And a chance to have like all these great coaching talents, guys that have been head coaches, guys that have been some of the best position coaches in the NFL, guys that have been coordinators, kind of all converging here at SC to join our staff was a big deal. You could feel the momentum behind it in the spring. There's a lot of excitement, but ultimately you got to go prove it in the fall, and we're going to get our chance.
It's been written that you have one of, if not the toughest schedules in the nation this year, and I think the media probably makes more of that than coaches do, if I'm not mistaken, because whether you're in the Big 12 or you're in the Pac-12 or you're in the Big 10, you're going to play really good opponents every year. So when you look at an overall schedule and you get ready to head into week one, I know the focus is always on week one, but how do you approach a schedule like the one that you have in 24?
Well, you look at it from two different perspectives. Number one is you, the competitor, your team. From a competitive aspect, you love what we're doing, right? I mean, I don't know that any team in the country is going to play as many marquee games, as many highly competitive games as we're going to get to play this year. And it's a phenomenal opportunity to play some great venues, some great teams. I mean, it's a tremendous opportunity. So the competitor in you loves it. Now, I think all of us are going to go through an adapting process to where you start to understand with the new playoff system, and then we'll see obviously what happens in the next few years, but the new playoff system now, but you've got a lot of scheduling that happened multiple years ago because this playoff system wasn't in effect. There will be some learning and adapting to make sure you're also putting your program in the best position you can to compete and to win championships. And so, we're going to balance that side of it. The one that we have right now is the one we have, and we're really excited about it.
Wisconsin, Penn State, Rutgers, and Nebraska, I believe offhand, are the 4 Big Ten teams that play in LA this year for your home conference schedule. What should they and their fan bases expect if they're making their first trip out to see a game at the Coliseum?
Well, They get to look at that. Let's start there.
That's not a bad start.
Yeah, no, it's an incredible place to come. I mean, one, just to come visit. I mean, it's one of the most desirable places in the world to come visit for a reason. And when you spend some time here, you'll see that in your ability to come experience, LA, the surrounding area, Southern California. There truly is nothing like it, especially if it's a cold, winter, snowy day back home potentially. And then, listen, to come watch a game in the Coliseum, whether you're a coach, you're playing in the game as a player, a fan, it's just one of those places. I mean, when you walk in, you get chills. You think about all the history in that stadium, all that's happened in that stadium, multiple Super Bowls, multiple Olympics. I mean, it's the different people, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, the Pope, I mean, JFK. You can go on down the line of people that have spoke or presented in that stadium. It just has an incredible feel, and it's really a setting unlike any other. So, and then you add in obviously the excitement of this new conference affiliation, these new matchups. It'll be some pretty cool settings this year.
Speaking of stadiums, one stadium, Lucas Oil in Indianapolis, has been the dominant host so far of the championship game, and I know there's some discussion that the championship games themselves could be in a evolutionary stage depending on what happens with the playoff. As one of the West Coast schools, how important would it be to you for a conference championship game to actually get moved around a little bit and maybe be a little bit closer to the West Coast every now and then?
Yeah, I think you understand that if there's not a central location that maybe fits for everybody, that maybe you do rotate it around, and it's good for the different fans. I think it's good for fans to be able to go experience new places, like you mentioned about coming to LA into the Coliseum this year. And we've got so many great venues now within our Big Ten footprint. When you add these West Coast schools, it just expands that, and I think makes even more of them available. So I think it would be a little short-sighted on our part as a conference and a league to not take a look at, what could some sort of rotation look like.
All right, lastly, I know the legislation is currently ongoing with the revenue sharing, which seems like it is absolutely going to happen. You're in LA, kind of the center of entertainment and show business. What does that NIL space in the future look like for you, and how do you envision it in the future affecting your program?
Well, we're excited about the potential rev share because I think it does put some guidelines around what we're doing. It gives it some structure, which I think has been much needed. We've been operating for the last few years, as has been talked about, obviously a lot kind of in between, and so I think this is going to be a great thing for just, I think, the process. I think a great thing for people to understand what the rules actually are. It'll be a great thing for the athletes, and so I'm excited that it's coming on. The role of NIL going forward in the future, I'm sure, will be, a big part of that in terms of, how does that happen now that we have rev share. So we'll adapt, but fortunately for us, we're in a place that, regardless of which way it goes, we have advantages here. You just do, and they're advantages that are built in, and they're significant advantages. So we'll try to use those as a competitive advantage like we would anything else.